Hello and welcome to UMicast. Today we are joined by the Small Business Commissioner, Emma Jones, who is here to tell us all about what actions are being taken to tackle the headache that is late payments, a subject which unfortunately does impact many businesses across the UK. So, hello, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today to have this discussion. I thought maybe it would be useful to start off by setting the scene somewhat at first and delving into a bit more about you and what your history and experience is before this role, just to give listeners a bit of an idea of where it is that you're coming from with this.
Sure, would love to. And thanks very much for having me on. So lovely to be here. So, yes, my history is in starting, growing, and then exiting my own businesses. So, coming into a government role, the Office of the Small Business Commissioner is an arm's length body. So, we work to the Department for Business and Trade. So, yes, coming into this as a full-time role was a different move for me to make. But hopefully kind of the experience I bring from the private sector, having been a small business owner myself, is helpful in the role that I'm now in. So the last business that I had before becoming Small Business Commissioner was a business called Enterprise Nation. We work very closely with UMI, and Enterprise Nation's still going strong today. So it exists to help people start and grow small businesses. And pretty much my kind of past 2 decades have been in the small business world. So hopefully making sure that I'm representing the interests of small firms. And of course, now in the Office of the Small Business Commissioner, very focused on this topic of payment, but also trying to make sure that the wider voice of small business is heard across government.
Fab, yeah. And I think, that's an interesting point to make, is that it seems like you've always sort of had this entrepreneurial bug yourself. And particularly in your last business at Enterprise Nation, that you were involved in, that business itself is supporting other businesses, similar to your role now. So, is that something that you've always been interested in and involved in, and has that shaped sort of where you've gone now as the Small Business Commissioner?
Absolutely. I mean, if you kind of go back way back when, I was brought up by a mum who ran restaurants as we were growing up as kids. So all I've ever known is being surrounded by people who run their own businesses. And there's a lot of talk on this actually in terms of how do we encourage young people to start businesses. You don't want young people to think, oh, well, if I can't see it, I can't be it. So, if you haven't got entrepreneurship in your family, how do we try and still encourage young people to think, well, actually, you could still give it a go? But I guess I had a really fortunate experience because sort of starting and growing a business felt like the most normal thing in the world to me. I did, though, have 5 years working for, when I left university, for a big professional services organisation, a company called Arthur Anderson. And again, actually, when I speak to young people who are looking to start up, one of the pieces of advice I give is maybe go and work somewhere else first, build up your network, build up your business confidence, build up your knowledge, then potentially kind of go and start a business. So that's what I did, spent 5 years working at what was a great company. And then started my first business when I was 27. So yes, I've kind of then spent time ever since starting my own businesses, but as you say, hopefully helping others do the same thing. And, the great thing is this country is what I've seen over the past kind of couple of decades of working on this is we have indeed become a very enterprising nation. So sometimes when people say kind of, there's lots of issues in small business, in a way, I sometimes pause and think this is kind of a good problem to have because we've got so many businesses, and therefore, kind of, this is why there's kind of lots of issues coming down the line, that we have a very strong entrepreneurial community. So, yes, it's always kind of been my passion. And I think the change in terms of coming into the role of commissioner is a case for me of do I feel that I can achieve more or have greater impact from within the public sector, very much at the heart of where decisions are being made for policy, and hopefully kind of, sort of influence from the inside to say, right, how do we make lives easier for small businesses?
Fab. And I assume, now that you're 3 months into the role of Small Business Commissioner, the answer to that question was yes. I
Well, if 3 months in, it's been fascinating. It's incredible to, and as I say, we're an arm's length body, so we don't sit within the department, but the department is our sponsoring agency. And it has been a fascinating first quarter. And I kind of came in with this mission of saying, right, how do we make life easier for small businesses? Our part of that, of course, is how do we get money moving around the economy and quicker into the hands of small firms? So that's kind of the particular role that we play in this. But the small business plan was launched at the end of July. And of course, it was fascinating kind of seeing that in its development, because that covers everything from access to finance, high street, which is kind of what's called everyday entrepreneurs, again, encouraging entrepreneurship in young people. So there is so much work and so much thought going on across government in terms of, again, how do we kind of continue to make sure that the UK is a great place to both start, but also keep growing your business.
Great. And you touched a bit there on what your role primarily sort of focuses on. But if we could just explore that a bit more. What is it that you do, whether it be on a day to day or your sort of overarching goals in the role?
Yeah, would love to share that with you. Well, maybe a little bit of an intro to the office itself. So, the Office of the Small Business Commissioner, OSBC, as it's kind of known for short, was set up in 2017. So, I'm the fourth Small Business Commissioner since it's existed. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but the remit is very clearly focused on payment. So, it's helping small businesses who are not getting paid by larger corporates and larger suppliers. And so when I interviewed for the role and then kind of came into the role, there's quite an interesting approach to kind of how you try and solve the problem statement of how do we make sure there's a world where no small business owner is ever chasing late invoices, which would be the absolute kind of ideal vision. And the approach, I guess, that kind of I'm taking is it's a combination of both carrot and stick. So, on the carrot perspective, how do we encourage businesses that paying on time is just the right thing to do? And we're doing lots of positive communication and engagement around that at the moment. But of course, sometimes you need a stick, which quite often when it comes to government is legislation. And I know you'll know this, Callum, but we've got open a consultation at the moment which looks at potential measures, new powers for the office, penalties, fines that could become law, and that then would essentially be applied to repeat offenders. But sort of whilst that's happening, and we have a consultation open until the end of October, potentially that would go through legislation across 2026. But in the meantime, we've got lots of work to do to kind of say, right, how do we kind of address this particular problem that we've got with late payment? So things that we're doing lots of things in the office. We've just had a busy kind of first quarter. We're doing lots around digital adoption because we can see there's a very clear connection between small businesses who adopt digital technologies getting paid quicker. So we're doing lots with the Department of Business and Trade, but also the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology around how do we make the case to small businesses that adopting digital tools and tech is a good thing, makes you more productive, gets you paid on time. We're also working with e-commerce marketplaces to make sure that digitally traded small firms also get paid very quickly. And then from a macroeconomic perspective, we're doing some work on a topic called open finance. So the UK is this great leader in what's called open finance, which is essentially where bank transaction data of how businesses are performing can be shared with third parties in order to serve small businesses better. And we're at the early stages of starting to explore if we have access to all of this data on how small businesses are performing, how can we use that better in order to speed up the payments that are being made to those small businesses? So we're doing lots of work kind of looking at how technology, digital can help us, sort through this prompt payment problem. But also we're celebrating those who are paying others on time. So On behalf of government, we manage something called the Fair Payment Code, and that's something that businesses of any sizes can apply to. We have 3 categories. You are given an award, and it's either bronze, silver, or gold. And at the highest level, gold is businesses where they're paying 95% of their invoices within 30 days. So that's what we consider to be kind of top class. And that's a big thrust for us at the moment, is encouraging more businesses to sign up to the Fair Payment Code. And as I say, kind of how do we showcase that a positive payment culture is a good thing for every business to follow? So lots of work going on communications, digital adoption, and also kind of making sure we're working across both public and private partners to get the prompt payment message out there.
I mean, it'd be great to unpack all of that, because clearly a lot going on there. Um, I suppose starting with just late payments in general, clearly it is, a widespread issue, hence why it's such a big focus of yours. And yeah, I myself come from a background of working for like very small businesses, maybe where there's only 3 or 4 of us, and especially those types of businesses just don't have the sort of income to fall back on when they aren't paid, and it's a big headache. It's very stressful, when those payments don't come in. So what is the sort of current situation, or perhaps the situation before you came into the role, and why does it need tackling?
Yeah, well, it is still a big problem. And I mentioned that the small business plan was launched by government at the end of July. On the same day, we came out with some research looking at the size of the late payment issue in the UK, and some quite sobering statistics. So 38 businesses sadly go out of business every day due to late payment. Small business owners, this one probably won't surprise you, spend on average 86 hours chasing debt. Again, having been a business owner myself, I know it's a very thankless task. You'd much prefer to be spending your time in more productive ways. And then there's an estimate figure of the cost to the UK economy of late payment is at around £11 billion. So it's a big issue, and it's kind of something that kind of needs sorting. And this consultation I mentioned, the Prime Minister himself launched the Small Business Plan at the end of July. And front and centre of the plan was actually the payment consultation. So there is a real intent within government to say, right, we recognise the size of the issue. We accept it affects all small businesses. We really want to try and stamp this out. And the response to that is to open up the consultation to say, shall we look at new measures? And there's 9 measures in total that we're looking at in the consultation. And the kind of things we're considering, Callum, is things like, can we move the UK to maximum payment terms of 60 days, coming down to 45 over the next 5 years? Can we look at mandatory interest that's paid on late invoices? We're looking at the use of retention payments in the construction sector. And then we're looking at the ability of the office itself to penalise and fine businesses that do repeatedly offend. So essentially, kind of, this is government's way of saying, look, we're going to get tough on this. We think it's unacceptable when large companies don't pay their suppliers on time. And therefore, we're moving towards legislation to beef up the powers of the office to act. So as I say, kind of that process and the timeline for that will take kind of potentially up to a couple of years to come into effect. But that's why I'm kind of very motivated with the team that's in place to say, whilst we're kind of waiting for that legislation to go through, and there's a big intent to kind of push that through, we also have to be carrying on with business as usual. So making the case for a positive payment culture, encouraging businesses to sign up to the Fair Payment Code, investigating cases on behalf of small businesses. So we have a casework team that where a small business hasn't been paid by a large supplier, they can come to us, and on their behalf, we investigate that. So we are continuing with the work in hand to address the problem, to do as much as we can in a positive vein, whilst also overseeing the legislation that goes through. So there's a lot of work that's being done because it's a multifaceted problem. And so there's a lot of work that's kind of being done to say, right, We accept the size of the problem. Here are the different ways that we want to approach to sorting it.
Yeah, it's never a simple solution to these problems, is there?
Absolutely. If it was just one thing, Callum, it would be so easy.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned it there, but I suppose all these measures coming together are an attempt, I suppose, to create that better culture, isn't it? It's like you say, it's the right thing to do, just to pay on time, and be able to expect those payments in. So hopefully creating a better payment culture in general, can help with these issues. Um, so I suppose if I'm a small business and I'm listening now, I'm struggling to get paid. I've been having these issues. Perhaps they're ongoing. Perhaps it's the first time I've experienced them. What would you say, is my, I suppose, number one port of call? How do I go about now, trying to get paid?
Well, I'm a little bit biased on this. I'd say visit the Office of the Small Business Commissioner website, but quite seriously, we have content for small businesses on essentially how to do everything well from the moment that you're looking at a contract. And that's kind of really where the payment issue starts, is small businesses looking at the terms and conditions that they're signing in a contract, through to, I know it sounds really basic, but having the right information on the invoice so that you can mitigate any issues to it being delayed when it comes to getting paid. So we've got lots of help and advice on how to contract well in order to get paid well. So please visit the Small Business Commissioner website to get access to that. If businesses are having issues, then I mentioned you can contact the casework team to kind of raise that. And actually, Callum, just one other thing to kind of share when we're talking about, it's just the right thing to do to pay suppliers on time. I have to say that kind of since joining in role, I've been on a couple of calls with large companies where cases have been made against companies where they're not getting paid. And I've gone onto the calls to kind of hear what are the reasons that companies are giving for sort of not paying suppliers. And I have to say, in my experience so far, it is not a case of large companies not wanting to pay suppliers on time. So this is not bad intent, certainly not from what I've seen. What it is processes not necessarily working as they should. So it's maybe that large corporates can't identify SMEs in their supply chain in order to make sure that they're paid at a quicker pace, or a large company has just changed their system and therefore that's kind of led to delays in kind of the payments that are happening. So I would say to small firms, it's quite unusual when a large company deliberately doesn't want to pay you, but it's better if you can start from the contracting to the invoicing, do all of that well. And then, as I say, if you are having issues, then kind of come to us as the casework team that we can help. But also, I would say, even to small businesses, consider signing up to the Fair Payment Code as well, because it creates this halo effect that the more businesses that say, I'm on the Fair Payment Code, I'm paying my suppliers on time, then of course that sends out a really good signal to other businesses who say, well, actually, if you pay on time, I'd much prefer to deal with you. So that's the advice I'd give to small businesses.
Great, fab. And those resources, I'm sure, are incredibly helpful because I suppose it's easy to forget that a lot of people do start businesses not because they're an expert in business and therefore, dealing with these sorts of issues. It's because they are passionate about what they're starting their business in, whether, I don't know, they're a bakery or something like that. That's what they're experts in, really. So it's always a bit of a learning game, isn't it? And trying to upskill in these areas is really helpful. Um, and you touched again on the Fair Payment Code there. Could you run me through a bit of, what that actually looks like and what that entails for those that are signed up to it?
Absolutely. So again, businesses can go onto our website. You can click into a dedicated, well, it's a separate site for the Fair Payment Code. So it's free to apply. So when you apply to the code, you send in information to our team. You do need to give references from clients who can just give a reference that you do pay within the terms that you're saying. And then essentially our team do due diligence and come back to you to say the award level that you've received. We're at almost so it was launched late last year, 2024, and we're at almost 400 businesses signed up. And currently, we're doing a very big push on encouraging more large companies to sign up to the code. But for small businesses, I think it's a great thing to have. We've got some lovely case studies of small businesses who do very prominently display on their website and their marketing materials that they're on the Fair Payment Code. Because, as I say, it sends out a really strong signal to potential employees, suppliers, even future customers. So yes, free to apply, no reason not to, and you can do it in a pretty speedy fashion. And we've got a great team who are on hand to kind of review the figures that come through and then come back to you to let you know that the level of award that you've got.
Excellent. And you're right that it does have a wider knock-on effect than just talking about payments here, whether it's, like you say, attracting more employees and the like as well. It's all, again, that culture element, isn't it? And it that you are trying to go about things in the correct way or the right way, which is always great. Again, earlier you sort of touched on how, this isn't necessarily just an issue for those trying to get paid, but for those who are paying as well, and how, it's obviously it's not necessarily always malicious in any way. It's just sometimes they might be struggling to engage with those suppliers and things like that. Is there any sort of advice or pointers on that side of the fence as well, and how they can better improve?
For the large companies, yeah, well, and we're working actually very hard with the large businesses. So, what we really appreciate, in fact, I shared this on LinkedIn, probably within a couple of weeks of me joining. There's a business called Intuit. I'm sure you know them. It's a large cloud accounting provider. They've written a brilliant guide on how Intuit themselves got into rapid payment for their small business suppliers. And this is something we're super keen to encourage, where large companies produce best practice guides on how they've gone through the process, because then they can share it with their peer groups. Similarly, we have an event in mid-October, an in-person event where the finance director from Aviva, who have got gold on the Fair Payment Code, he's coming to talk around the journey to securing that award on the Fair Payment Code, why it's important to Aviva as a company, how they went about securing that. And again, the more that large companies in different sectors, from finance to construction, the more that they share the story of the benefits they've seen as a large business of being on the code, paying their suppliers on time, the more you see the ripple effect of other companies in their particular sector saying, okay, well, we should do the same. So there's that positive piece, but also there is something that kind of, again, this kind of going back to the government infrastructure that's built that encourages this to happen. There is a public requirement for large companies to report their payment performance. So this is now in place. Companies are reporting. And again, this is very useful for us because it makes payment transaction data very transparent. So we can see the payment performance of large companies, based on which we can see where they could appear in the Fair Payment Code. But we can also see companies who are maybe not doing such a good job. So that has really helped us, that information is now transparently available. So I think it's those two things, Callum. It's making things open, where companies have a responsibility to share their performance, whilst also building this kind of positive culture, encouragement around the benefits of paying on time. So I think it's those kind of both approaches that we take, particularly when it comes to working with the large companies.
Great. Yeah, it's definitely something that requires everyone to take part in. It's not just a sort of issue to solve for one side, is it? So, um, fantastic. So you're obviously just over 3 months into the role now. Um, if we were to speak again in a year's time, in a couple of years' time, and you said, right, we've been successful with this, what would that mean to you? What would success look like?
Well, first of all, I've only got 2 years to be successful, so we'll be speaking in less than 2 years. So it's a 2-year term that I'm in. And you're right, this is kind of something that's on my mind every day is what does success look like? And we've spent time as a team setting metrics in terms of what we want to deliver. But if I boil it down, essentially to kind of one thing, and I do kind of keep on talking about this, is on a qualitative level, how do we make life easier for small businesses? On a quantitative level, how do we do that by reducing the number of hours they're having to spend when it comes to chasing debt? So I know it's a tough call, but kind of when I look ahead to kind of the end of the 2-year term, if we can say we've made life a little bit easier, the way in which we've done that is take out some of the friction and therefore reduced the amount of hours that small businesses spend chasing debt, then I will think we'd all feel pretty pleased that we've been able to kind of make a positive contribution. So that's kind of the key metric. And then just as an aside to that, and again, it's the focus of this event we're running in mid-October. If you can reduce the hours spent chasing debt through all of the activity we're doing, then of course what we want to look at is, well, then what does that free up founders to do? So could those hours that were spent in a non-productive way be spent on exporting, innovating, hiring? And so that's just kind of, hopefully once we've achieved this, that's the other thing we want to look at is, okay, now let's look at productive use of time and how can we support businesses going for growth by taking those hours and freeing up time and cash to do that.
Mm, yeah, exactly. And yeah, you're absolutely right there. The amount of hours that are spent chasing these payments and things like that are, time that isn't spent on that more productive and quite frankly more interesting stuff for businesses as well. It's a bit of a thankless task, as you said earlier, chasing these things. Fabulous. So lots of things for people to think about and consider there. How do people get in touch if they're looking for more support or to get involved in these things? How would you like people to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty much everywhere on social platforms. Well, I say that, and that's not quite the case, but I'm very active on LinkedIn and very active on X. And actually on LinkedIn, I produce every Friday, I do a newsletter update on the work that we're doing in the office. So people can kind of sign up to that, contact me personally, but of course also contact the office, which is through the Small Business Commissioner website. So yeah, we're very much kind of open for business, very accessible. And yeah, we're very happy to hear from small businesses in the hope that we can help them if they've got a payment issue.
Perfect. That's great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to talk about this with me and sharing it with our listeners. I'm sure there's a lot of value to be gained in it, and as I say, a lot of things to think about and work on moving forward.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me on, Callum. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us for this episode. It was a very interesting conversation with Emma. If you're struggling with late payments or want to know more, I'd absolutely recommend to reach out to the Office of the Small Business Commissioner, who will be able to help you out. Alternatively, if you'd like to explore other business-related topics, take a look at Umi's SatNav, where you'll find a range of resources to help you do more and go further on your business journey, including more podcasts just like this.